Greetings, Temple Beth Shalom. Rabbi Boxt here for a message about this week's Parshat BaMidbar, Numbers, beginning chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 4, verse 20. Now, BaMidbar, it describes the records or records the Israelites' 40-year journey from Mount Sinai to the plains or the steppes of Moab. There's their last stop before they enter the promised land. And the beginning of the book is a census or a counting of all of the Israelites, the eligible fighting men among the people who left Egypt. And Bamidbar translates in Hebrew to in the wilderness or in the desert. So the reason why it's called Numbers is because, of course, it is a census. The number of Israelites are counted, but it occurs Bamidbar in the desert. And the book itself is often described as a kind of wilderness because there's a sequence of narratives that don't necessarily feel like they are all placed together, although they are. They don't always necessarily fit, but they are. And we have the idea that, in the book of Exodus ends with a description of the tabernacle and the priests. The book of Leviticus then talks about all of the ways in which the laws and all of the ways in which the Israelites are to be a holy people. And Bamidbar continues from Exodus exactly where Exodus finished off, with this idea of how God's presence filled the tabernacle in Exodus, and now we have the tabernacle complex and how the Israelites form, how the tribes are placed surrounding the tabernacle. I'm going to quote a little bit here from the Torah, a women's commentary. This is the architecture of a count and the architecture of a count. The sacred space described in Parashat BaMidbar bridges the end of Exodus and the beginning of Numbers. Exodus concludes with the magisterial description of the tabernacle and the priests, both resplendent in the colorful handiwork of Israelite women. Once God's presence fills the tabernacle and not even Moses can enter, a distinction between divine and human becomes clear. Leviticus follows with laws concerning how to negotiate this boundary between divine and human. Numbers then returns to the topic to which Exodus ends. In Numbers, the perspective is widened to include the formation in which Israel camps with the tabernacle at its center. The tabernacle complex, with its collapsible boundaries and open spaces, creates a sense of order in the unfamiliar chaos of the wilderness. The tabernacle also helps orient the Israelites in the vast expanse of that wilderness, since they stay or go based on the ascent and descent of the cloud of God's presence. In this sense, God lives amidst the Israelites throughout their journey to the promised land. So the order of the community is very, very important. And in this week's Parshat BaMidbar, the first Parsha in the book of Numbers, there are three main outlined pieces. Part one is the names and the numbers, the Israelites in the wilderness, the tribes, the census, the Levites. Number two, the geometry of the holy, the east, the south, the center, the west, the north, and a conclusion. And then the Levites, the election of the priests, the election of the Levites, the organization of the Levites, the price of redemption, and the service of the Levites. So this Torah portion is really concerned with counting, numbers, census. And it all happens in the desert, in the last steps before they go into the land of Israel. So it's a shorter portion, perhaps not necessarily in the number of words or the count of the letters or the count of the words, but in the fact that it's very, very distinctual in listing the tribes by census, by the names of the representatives, by how they're representing their different tribes by name. So in that case, it's a little bit different. But nonetheless, it's our parsha for this week. Shabbat Shalom.